You are listening to the Nightline Sports Network, brought to you by Travis Dever and the Dever team, 386-690-1636.
Welcome to the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Yes, school was out for summer, and apparently so was I. But with the smell of football back in the air, we are back with our weekly endeavor on the AAC Report. And coming up on this show, we will start our team-by-team previews. Kelly Hines of the Tulsa World will be here to talk about the Golden Hurricane, and Frank Murtaugh of the Memphis Flyer and Memphis Magazine will stop by to talk about the Memphis Tigers. So that will be coming up shortly. But first, AAC Media Days going on at their new offices in Irving, Texas. Commissioner Mike Aresco had his opening remarks, a state of the conference, if you will. Let's hear those now.
First, I do want to welcome everyone to our 2021 Football Media Day. And I can say what a difference a year makes. We're not through the pandemic yet, but certainly we've made a lot of progress, and we have every expectation of playing, all of our games this year. I know you're going to enjoy meeting our football student athletes and our coaches. I know you're going to enjoy Media Day, having interaction with them. But before I make a few brief remarks, I would like to recognize several individuals who've been influential in the success of our conference and also our football. Neville Pinto, the president of the University of Cincinnati, is our conference chair. Mike Fitz at Tulane he's the president of Tulane, is our vice chair. Our past chair, whom I had a strong relationship with for a number of years, David Rudd, president of the University of Memphis. Our Board of Governors representative is Renu Couture of Houston. Michael Kelly is the chair of our ADs group. Chris Pesman is our vice chair. Chris is from Houston, the AD. And I do want to recognize Scott Draper, who handles all of our football and did an unbelievable job last year arranging all the testing. It was a very complicated year, and he did a phenomenal job working with everyone. And I do want to recognize also Donna DeMarco, who is our COO, who kind of organizes everything for us. And without her, I don't think our conference office would function the way it does. So again, all these people have had tremendous influence and tremendous impact, and I applaud their work and I salute them. The first thing I want to mention is the pandemic. I'm extremely proud of the way we dealt with it last year. It was as monumentally as challenging a situation as we're ever likely to face, and I think we dealt with it in a cautious, straightforward, and common sense manner. We afforded our student athletes an opportunity to play. There were bumps in the road, but virtually all our student athletes wanted to play. We did it safely under strict testing and operational protocols. We had and we have, and we've kept it in place, an outstanding medical advisory group led by Dr. Greg Stewart of Tulane. I can't say enough about Greg's work chairing this committee. We met literally well over 100 times, probably closer to 200 overall. We're meeting often twice a week. We won't have to meet quite as much this year, we think, but nevertheless, I deeply appreciate and congratulate them on their important work, which, as I said, is ongoing. This year, though, is different. Vaccinations have made a real difference. But that said, COVID is still with us, and with the very contagious Delta variant still a potentially significant problem, it's imperative that we vaccinate as many of our student athletes as possible. We want everyone vaccinated. We're doing pretty well. We're getting up there in numbers, but our ability to play a full, uninterrupted season may well depend on it. We will continue to test unvaccinated players, and those with COVID or in close contact will face contact tracing and quarantines. And that can potentially compromise a team's ability to play, which obviously we don't want. We've decided that we will not reschedule games this year. If a team cannot play because of COVID, it will be considered a forfeit. Now, that is our current position. However, we continue to monitor the CDC guidance and we'll react accordingly. Our medical advisory group meets next week, and we'll talk about the recent CDC guidance. In the meantime, as I said, we're going to advocate for universal vaccination for our student athletes. They have real incentives to get vaccinated, health and safety obviously being the primary one. And we as a conference also want to set a really good example for our campuses and for our communities with respect to the importance of vaccinations in eradicating this pandemic. With respect to CFP expansion, I wanted to mention that because it's very important to our conference. We're pleased with the CFP expansion recommendation, the CFP being the College Football Playoff, the recommendations put forth by the expansion working group. We're currently socializing this plan with our student athletes, our coaches, our faculty athletic reps, and others who are stakeholders in what we do. We're polling each school, and we're going to deliver the results to the CFP in mid-August, but I think we're going to find that our conference is supportive. We're especially excited about the meritocratic approach of the working group. The top 6 conferences without A5 AQs and without favor is good for us, but also it's good for college football. It's all FBS now under this plan, and we're going to work to dissolve the Group of 5 label and the Group of 5. It's been a protocol, and we're going to absolutely work hard to rid ourselves of it, because I don't think it's fair to anybody in the G5, and we want to consign this label to the historical dustbin where I think it really belongs. The kind of separation that it has entailed has been not been helpful to our branding and also to other schools in the G5. But we know that we've never felt we belong there, but we also felt that all FBS ought to be represented equally. We're pleased with the direction of the CFP and feel strongly that the outstanding performance of our top teams over the past several years, and UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, and Memphis have made New Year's Day games, but we have so many other teams that have contributed enormously to our success. And I think the approach that the working group took to this had something to do with how well our teams did and the pressure we put on the entire process. I do know that there is controversy regarding potential SEC expansion and the working group. I will not get into the issue of SEC expansion. It's not for me to comment. But if the CFP plan is a good one, and I believe it is, the current expansion speculation should not derail or delay the process. I see no reason for that. There was broad support for the CFP plan, and it should move forward. It creates greater opportunities for a wide range of teams, including our teams, who deserved a shot in prior seasons and obviously didn't have one. And it's a good thing to have that inclusion. It will also energize college football, I believe, as so many more teams will become relevant, and I think it's going to likely lead to higher ratings. So I'm all for the process moving ahead if, in fact, there is strong support for it as the CFP collects everyone's opinions this summer. As far as conference realignment is concerned, that's obviously the elephant in the room at the moment. And college football has historically been down this path, as you know, several times. As we witness changes and possible changes and even projected changes, we as a conference are in the strongest position we've ever been in, and we will consider and capitalize on every opportunity. Our schools are individually and collectively focused on our A6 status through competing at the highest level in every way. We've been doing that on the field with multiple top 10 football programs, and on the court with Houston's run to the Final Four and Memphis's NIT title, just to name a few of our accomplishments. We have a long-term and strategic commitment with our partners at ESPN, and they provide us with the largest stage for our teams, and they provide resources which provide the stability and strength that we have now come to represent. Our opportunities with expansion and conference realignment may be bolstered by our stability and unity in a less stable and an evolving landscape, but I want to emphasize we are not looking at realignment, and we are not out there attempting to take teams. While ESPN is a valued partner, I have to take a moment to address some accusations that have been made, either directly or indirectly, against our conference. Our conference, and I say this categorically, our conference has never strategically aligned or plotted, if you will, with ESPN to influence conference structures. We wouldn't do that. ESPN has never done that and would not do it. We do consult with our television and business partners on issues related to our conference. Everyone does, of course. But any suggestions or statements that we colluded with ESPN with regard to the structure of any other conference is a completely unfounded and grossly irresponsible accusation. And that's all I really have to say about this at this point. With respect to the Autonomy 6 campaign, and what really matters to fans is the Power 6 campaign that we've embarked upon over the last several years. It's extremely important to note that campaign, which we described in detail and advanced in a letter dated May 7th that we sent to the chairs of the A5, the P5 conferences, remains a focus of all we do in this conference. The A6 initiative is separate from the college football playoff, but it is indirectly related, as A6 status certainly enhances a conference's college football playoff selection committee credibility, and we've seen that because we saw last year the way Cincinnati was treated, and I think but for the G5 label, who knows, they might have had a legitimate shot at the playoff. The A6 initiative, as we call it, is on a parallel track with CFP expansion. Our conference's goal is to become an autonomy group member. We've never wavered in that goal. And we will continue to advance what we feel is obviously a critical cause for our membership. We've earned a seat at that autonomy table, and gaining it will solidify our position as an elite conference. I mentioned earlier that we've had a tremendous record of success on the field and on the court, and also our Olympic sports are extremely powerful. But we've had many teams in the final Associated Press and coaches poll standings. We attached what we called an Exhibit A to our letter to the A5 conferences, and we pointed out that on many occasions we've had multiple teams in the final AP and coaches polls, and 6 times we've had teams either in the top 10, 1 time in the top 11. American teams were ranked at least in one poll at least 225 times since 2013, and 10 of our 11 teams ranked at least once. And we've had teams multiple teams in the final playoff rankings most years, and we've had number 12 UCF should have been ranked higher, number 8 UCF should have been ranked higher, and number 8 Cincinnati, I feel, should have been ranked higher. 6 New Year's Bowl appearances in 8 years, I think, speaks for itself. 4 different teams reflects the depth of our league without question. We've had 52 wins against P5 teams in 8 seasons. We've had 3 New Year's Bowl wins, and we came very, very close last year to having a 4th. We have a 67-26 regular season record against G5 conferences since 2013, a 720 winning percentage. 72 future NFL players have played in our conference championship games. And one interesting fact is that in 2015, in our inaugural game, Temple played Houston. 27 players on that field, 27 players either played in the NFL or are still in the NFL. That's a remarkable statistic, and it shows the power of our league. 180 NFL players and 114 NFL draft picks in the past 8 years. So again, I could go on, and many times we've done more than a lot of the P5 conferences with respect to these, but I'm not going to single out any of those conferences. But it is clear that we have achieved at a very high level, and we deserve to be at that table, in addition to having outstanding institutions in many large markets. And we do great work with our racial equality group. We do great work with our conference academic consortium. And in every way, we belong with the A5 conferences. And the last thing I'll mention about that is our medical group did some fine work. They were tracking on the myocarditis issue well before anyone else. And had they had some input into those A5 discussions, which we initially were not a part of, I think we might have had some impact in terms of whether other conferences decided to play. Ultimately, who knows, because they had their own reasons for not playing. But we felt strongly that we could play safely, and I think they made a huge contribution, and I think it would have been useful for the overall A5. Finally, as I close, and again, I look forward to a great media day today. We're, again, thrilled to have Chris with us and Rini. This conference is always going to do what's in its best interest. We're a strong conference with a strong brand. We have a membership committed to excellence on and off the field and court. We're aggressive in our goals and ambitions, but with respect to realignment, the way we look at it is if there are schools interested in us who would enhance our brand and be a good cultural and competitive fit, then why wouldn't we consider them? What happens down the road, whatever happens down the road, we're going to continue to focus on growth and excellence and continue to compete at the highest level of intercollegiate athletics, which we have always done from the very outset of this conference. This conference is, as I said, proud of its achievements, but we're not satisfied by any means. There's much more to accomplish, and we're going to remain steadfast in our mission to provide our student athletes with the highest level of competition and the highest level of support in their academic and other endeavors.
Opening remarks from AAC Media Days from Commissioner Mike Aresco. And the AAC preseason media poll was taken, and Cincinnati has been deemed the favorite to win the 2021 conference title, getting 22 of 24 first-place votes for 262 total points. UCF got the other 2 first-place votes for 241 points and number 2. The rest of the rankings shake out. SMU is 3, Houston 4, Memphis 5th, Tulsa at 6th, Tulane 7th, East Carolina Navy tied for 8th, Temple at 10th, and South Florida at 11th. Over the past few years, it's been interesting to note the first 7 seasons of the media poll. In the very first year, Louisville was picked as the favorite and UCF was the champion. Cincinnati was picked as the favorite in 2014. They tied for first with UCF and Memphis. Cincinnati was again the pick in 2015, but Houston won the title that year. Houston was the pick in 2016, but Temple took the honors that season. 2017, South Florida was picked as the favorite, but UCF had their national championship season. The Knights picked as the favorite in 2018, and the only one to finish as the champion after that season. The Knights also picked first in 2019 and 2020. Memphis was the champion in 19, and Cincinnati, as you know, winning it last year. Coming up next, we'll start our team-by-team previews. Kelly Hines of the Tulsa World will get us started. Talk about the Golden Hurricane. That's next, when the AAC Report continues right after this.
Hey, this is Travis Dever, Kai's Real Estate, the Dever team, New Smyrna Beach. Your source for real estate and everything else, New Smyrna Beach. Proud sponsor of Nightline. Call me anytime at 386-690-1636. That's 386-690-1636. Let me show you my hometown, New Smyrna Beach, UCF's favorite beach. Go Knights and charge on.
An auto accident can change your life forever. At Chad Barr Law, we are raising the bar on what to expect from your personal injury attorney. Hi, I'm Chad Barr, and I want you to know that our entire team is dedicated to providing you with the representation you deserve in your greatest time of need. If you or a loved one have been injured in an auto accident, call 407-599-9036 for a free consultation or visit chadbarlaw.com. At Chad Barr Law, our clients come to us in need and leave as family. Offices, Altamont Springs.
Looking for more out of your Porsche? Look no further than Flat6Motorsports.com. They have the widest selection of aftermarket Porsche parts anywhere in the world. With over 85 product lines and in-depth expertise, Flat6Motorsports.com is your one-stop shop for any Porsche performance needs. Whether you're shopping for intakes, exhausts, suspension, or tuning, they have you covered. Flat6Motorsports.com is the premier Porsche aftermarket specialist. Check them out at Flat6Motorsports.com.
All right, time to start our team-by-team previews, and our pleasure to welcome once again to the show Kelly Hines of the Tulsa World. She is here now to join us to talk about the Golden Hurricane. Kelly, thanks so much again for being on.
Yes, it's about that time of year. It's time for some football almost. I'm so glad we've made it to this point. Let's just hope everything stays calm for the next few weeks. Yes, amen to that. Keeping our fingers crossed for that is for sure. So Tulsa coming off an appearance after last season in the AAC Championship. So we go into this season, and Zach Smith will not be the quarterback. He has graduated. So who will be lining up under center for Tulsa to start the campaign?
All signs point to Davis Bren, who really the only significant minutes playing time that he's gotten was, in the very memorable comeback win against Tulane. He quarterbacked in the fourth quarter when the Hurricane had that insane comeback and went on to win that game in overtime. So he's the guy. Seth Boomer is coming back from an injury that happened in that game. I think those are two very capable guys. We just haven't seen as much of Davis, but he was super impressive in that game.
Nonetheless, and the running game should get a nice boost because Shamari Brooks, 3-year starter who had an injury before last season, will be back. And also you got Deneric Prince, a big pounder back there as well. So I think some good things to be expected from the running game.
Yeah, and, I think so much of that depends on the offensive line, which all of those guys are back. And then they essentially have 6 starters back on the offensive line because Xavier Gadlin opted out, and he was a starter the previous year. So, and then they also have Bryce Bray, who started, at Oklahoma State. So they have a lot of really talented guys, a lot of depth on the offensive line, and obviously that's going to help with everything. But Shamari, he is expected to pick up where he left off, before the injury, which he's a very skilled running back, very intelligent, works really well with offensive line, and Deneric Prince is very flashy, explosive. So I expect it to be, the 1-2 punch that Tulsa has really had a lot of success with, with a variety of guys. Under Philip Montgomery, they always seem to have a couple of really good running back options, and I think it'll certainly be the case with those two.
Yeah, definitely. What you say about the offensive line is great to have all that depth and experience going into this campaign. And then the receiving core, Keelan Stokes caught 46 passes a year ago. Josh Johnson found the end zone 6 times. And Juan Carlos Santana also gives him some yardage in the receiving game. So this looks like like Tulsa has an opportunity to improve upon their offensive performance from a year ago.
I would think so. I mean, everything is pointing to that because, everyone is back on offense except for Zach Smith and except for Corey Taylor. But those are guys who they have really good options to replace them. It's not, always going to be a definite that you can replace guys with that much experience. But, I think that when you have the playmakers that Tulsa has, and now they're a year older, they're more experienced. I think, especially at receiver, I think those guys gained a lot of confidence last year. And they've got some options. And, I think there's more depth there than there has been in the past. Because, oftentimes with Philip Montgomery, he has that very small circle of trust. You don't see very many guys with a lot of catches. I think that, it could be spread around a little bit more this year, especially when you're expecting Davis Brin to come in, and he's been extremely accurate, in that one quarter that he's played, and then throughout the spring. I think that he is going to put up some numbers. He's going to be that sort of big-time passer. Maybe not this year, but I think he has that potential in his career, and I think that this year it will definitely be a step in the right direction.
Well, of course, we all know that defense was the calling card for Tulsa last year, which was made responsible for them getting as far as they did a year ago. They're going to get 9 starters back, but you don't just replace the nation's best linebacker in Zaven Collins, so it's probably good that they got a lot of experience to help fill that void.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird how things worked out with the starting cornerbacks both leaving after the spring. Some other defensive backs decided to leave also, and so suddenly you go from having to replace one guy to now you're having to replace several, and that's tricky, especially when you don't have anyone with the experience that those corners had. I think 48 combined starts. I mean, that's a lot of experience. And so you're now trying to replace them with some transfers, and you don't know how that's going to go. So that's going to be the biggest question mark for this team. I think there are some good options. They were more prepared for Zaven to leave. I think everybody was expecting that. They played in the bowl game without him. I think that they had recruited to that. You didn't recruit to losing 2 of your other starters after the spring. So that's been the biggest kind of storyline of the off season. That'll be a big storyline in August to see how some of those incoming guys are going to, how that's going to translate. I mean, there's no telling how that's going to go, but still really good pieces elsewhere. I mean, your entire defensive line is back. the other linebackers are solid. Really skilled guys in the secondary, at safety. It's just, man, that was an unfortunate thing that happened at Tulsa.
Yeah, and of course, you mentioned the defensive front. Jackson Player was an All-AAC player a year ago, and he can get behind the line, so that certainly will be important to their effort.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think he has the chance to be, one of the best defensive players in the conference. I think he's been that. It just has been a little bit overshadowed because there's some really good defensive players in the American, and to have the best defensive guy in the league on your own team last year, I think that he got a little bit overlooked. But what he did made Zaven's job and everyone else's job so much easier. And he's just kind of this, I don't like the term freak athlete, but kind of that's what he is. I mean, he wasn't recruited very much because he's, 6 feet tall, but he's so low to the ground and so explosive. He just has this rare sort of skill set for his frame. But I mean, I hear all the time, people from other programs, fans of other teams who are like, man, I wish we had a guy like that. You just don't hear that very often about someone who plays for Tulsa. I mean, that's kind of unusual because they just, they have to go find guys and develop them instead of winning these, recruiting battles for 4- and 5-star guys. So, the fact that they've been able to do that, with David and Jackson, I think that kind of speaks to what the program's all about. But I think the ceiling is so high for Jackson. I think that he's just primed for a really incredible season.
So what do you think the 2021 season looks like? They had 3 straight losing seasons before the magic was created last season. What do you think their prospects are in the conference this year?
And I expect them to be picked somewhere in the middle of the pack, and I do think that they can overachieve. But I think so much of it is still up in the air. You look back to last season. I was talking to Philip Montgomery about this the other day. They caught so many breaks, but you have to make your own luck, quite a bit also. Whereas the previous years, they caught no breaks. Everything went against them. Every call that was crucial, every play that really defined a game. They just couldn't come up with any of those plays. And then last year it was the complete opposite. So everything comes together. Obviously you don't win the conference title game against Cincinnati. You don't win your bowl game. Both those were close games, but pretty much everything else, worked out so well for Tulsa, and you just don't know if you're going to get those same breaks. And so I think so many games in the American we see come down to just one play, and I just don't know if they're going to have that same sort of luck, the same sort of success that they had last year. I think it's going to be really difficult to follow that. But at the same time, I think the confidence of this team is still really high because they went out and did it last year. So I don't know if that answers any question, but I think that they'll have a chance. I think they have enough talent. They'll win some games. I don't think they'll, go undefeated in the American. I think that there'll be games that trip them up, and they certainly have a very difficult non-conference schedule because they play at Ohio State and at Oklahoma State. But, I think that they will have, a bowl season. I think that they will be a contender in the American. I don't see them finishing first or second.
Yeah, and and we talk about it all the time how tough the American has become with Cincinnati and UCF and SMU. Tulane gives people trouble. So it's definitely and obviously Memphis too. So I mean, you're talking about a conference that has definitely has made its mark. Real quick question: have all the repercussions been felt from the melee at the end of the bowl game with Mississippi State? Is all that now in the past?
I think that all of that was handled in the off season, but that's a really good question. I need to find out about that because it may be one of those deals where we see some guys sit out the first half of the first game, or maybe the entire game. It's UC Davis. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean that it's a for sure win. The first game is, you just have no idea what to expect. But, it wouldn't surprise me if there was something, associated with that game, just because pretty much almost everybody who was involved in that, there weren't that many players from Tulsa who were involved in it, but I think most of them, decided to come back. So they're still on the team. So, hypothetically, there could be something that carries into this year, but, I just kind of assumed that everything was handled with some off-season.
So, and the off-season has certainly brought its fair share of news. We've got the word of the increase in the college football playoff, and then, of course, even bigger news in your area, in your geographical region, is Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC, which looks like it's going to set off some big-time realignment, potentially. Give me your thoughts on those two things.
And it has been crazy around here because, I went to Oklahoma State and, the whole Bedlam dynamic, it's always a big thing here in Oklahoma. It's a very big deal, the games that are played between the two schools. And now to think about them, not being in the same conference, it's weird. It's, and obviously we went through this, several years ago when things were headed in one direction, but now it's like, no, this is really happening. So it's been like kind of a lot to process. And you do have to think about, the future, not just of the Big 12, but of the American and, what that means for some of these, smaller programs in the American, which, Tulsa being the smallest FBS school, it could be a real challenge to compete in the American when you're going up against schools that are infinitely larger. So the thought of bringing some Big 12 schools into the American, I think that's interesting, but it also, that's going to affect Tulsa for sure. So it's just, it seems like every day there's more developments with it. And I'm super curious to see what Mike Aresco says on Wednesday, see what he will acknowledge about what's going on.
Yeah, that will be definitely worth the price of admission for that. So, and then, with the expansion of the college football playoff coming down the road, how much can you speak to, the American having some influence in that with the recent seasons by Cincinnati and UCF, and the noise has been made over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely think, well, this is going to be a really good thing for the American. I mean, you have to think that way. But then, sometimes you see, okay, well, this is what it would have looked like in whatever year, and you're like, well, they're still left out. I think there's still work left to do. I think continuing to, win those key non-conference games with Power 5 schools, I think the American is still a ways from getting that respect. Maybe with conference realignment, that changes things. Maybe they will have, some teams in the league that, that will start to get some people's attention more, and that will affect things with the playoff. I just think that even if, it expands, there's still some people who will want, group of 5 or, teams in the American left out. I think you're always going to battle that perception that, they're not deserving. And I think, Cincinnati showed last year that they were deserving. I think there's always going to be exceptions, but I think, just if you ask the average person, they're going to say, oh, I'd rather see, a 2-loss SEC team than a no-loss American team. I think that you're just always going to deal with that battle, even if it expands.
Oh, I've always said if there's expansion, that's just room for more SEC teams. So.
Oh yeah, and I think that's very possible, and that's scary. I think that that could easily happen. That doesn't necessarily mean there's room at the table for a team in the American, because like you said, they could just make more room for Power 5 teams.
But hopefully it all works out and there becomes a legitimate path for teams in the American to actually get into a playoff. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as well. Kelly, please let folks know how they can follow you on Twitter and your work at the Tulsa World.
Twitter is Kelly Hines TW, and then online, tulsaworld.com.
All right. Well, Kelly Hines, thank you so much. Always appreciate your contributions to our show, talking about the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. And not before long, we're going to be seeing the football kicked off in the air and another season underway.
Thanks so much for having me.
And we'll be right back to talk about the Memphis Tigers, Frank Murtaugh, Memphis Magazine, and Memphis Flyer. We'll do that with us when the AAC Report only on the Nightline Sports Network continues right after this.
If you haven't figured it out yet, I love Tijuana Flats. I would love them even if they weren't a partner with us on the Nightline Sports Network. They have all kinds of great Tex-Mex food, and it's fresh, by the way. Made to order burritos, tacos, enchiladas, chimichangas, quesadillas, bowls, nachos, and taco salads. And if you haven't tried the queso, you are completely missing out. It is the best queso that I've ever had in my life. Absolutely hands down. And the sauce bar that they have, everything from wild to mild in there. Absolutely awesome, awesome stuff. Not only do I love the food at Tijuana Flats, but I love the company, a UCF-born company, and they give back to the community with the Justin Queso Foundation. So head to your local Tijuana Flats, Tex-Mex for everyone. Hey Jeep Wrangler owners, have you ever sat in your office at work and watched the rain just pour into your Jeep because the weatherman said that there was a 0 chance of rain? Or you put your doors back on because there was a 100% chance and then not a drop of rain fell? Well, there's a company out there that can help take the worry away and give you the peace of mind to be without your doors. The company's called Life Without Doors. They make waterproof rain curtains and dash covers for Wranglers. Life Without Doors is there to help make the decision to leave the doors at home an easy one. Find out more at lifewithoutdoors.com.
Spice up your company with homemade marketing services from Tasty Gravy Creative. Tasty Gravy serves up a menu of budget-friendly marketing, graphic design, and public relations services customized to your specific goals. Co-owned by a UCF graduate, Tasty Gravy can help refresh your brand, strengthen your online presence, or reinforce your company's message. Contact Tasty Gravy for help with your website, social media, marketing, advertising materials, and more. Visit tastygravy.com.
As we continue with our team previews, pleasure to welcome our good friend Frank Murtaugh of Memphis Magazine and the Memphis Flyer. He is here to talk about the Tigers for 2021. Frank, great to have you back on the show again.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Great to be with you, buddy.
Yes, and it's not going to be long before the season is underway. And as we talk about the Tigers, so it seems like for the first time in about 15 years, Brady White will not be under center as a college football quarterback. But here he is after the long-time Tiger starter threw close to 11,000 yards and 90 touchdowns. Who is going to be the next man up?
Yeah, Jeff, that's the big question. We are not going to have a PhD candidate quarterbacking the Memphis Tigers this year, whether or not they're fans in the stands. Yeah, Brady, he's got legend status around here now, and it's funny. I've been following Tiger football long enough to know that this was once a program that did not have stability necessarily behind center. And if you look at the last, I guess it's 8 years now, from Paxton Lynch to Riley Ferguson to Brady White, this has become sort of a quarterback U, at least within the constraints of the AAC. I had a chance to visit with Ryan Silverfield just last week, Jeff, and he's non-committal right now. There are 4 candidates to win that job, but the inside track is Grant Gunnell. He's a record-setting. I mean, amazing numbers he put up as a Texas high school star. He's a transfer from Arizona, 6'6". You drop back, classic mold of a passer, and he's more than likely going to be the guy who takes the torch from Brady. He threw 195 touchdown passes in high school. I'm going back a few years now, but I'm not great at math, but that works out to almost 50 touchdowns per season over 4 years of high school football. So Grant knows how to move the ball downfield. That's what this program has become, and I would anticipate come September 4th when Nicholls State comes to town that Grant will be behind center.
And of course, you mentioned speaking to Ryan Silverfield now in his second season. He took over the program and acquitted himself pretty well in his first season.
He really did. And under circumstances, Jeff, let's remember that no rookie head coach on any level of football would ask for. Ryan, he actually broke in at in the 2019 Cotton Bowl, the biggest game in University of Memphis history. Mike Norvell, had moved on to Florida State by then after winning the AAC championship, the 2019 AAC championship, and so there's Coach Silverfield on the sidelines in Dallas in the biggest game in program history. And he actually told me last week, Jeff, in reflecting, he said, who would have thought that preparing for the Cotton Bowl would be the easy part of my first year as head coach of this program? And, what he meant by that obviously was having to coach under the duress of COVID and the pandemic and the restrictions that, a large program, a roster that's, close to 100 kids, and then with the staff and the various lockdowns, it was arduous. But putting up an 8-3 record, and with a shutdown in the mix there for his program early in the year, I think that's flying colors for a rookie coach, and I think I'm speaking for him when I say that he just hopes to build on that. And let's cross our fingers and hope it's a more normal season here in 2021.
And of course, you mentioned the COVID thing. One of the biggest impacts was Kenneth Gainwell deciding to opt out before last season. The running game took a hit as far as that goes. So as they go into this season, who will be looking to take the mantle of providing some help for whoever the new quarterback's going to be?
Yeah, that was a big loss. Kenny Gainwell and DeMonte Coxie too, a stellar, record-setting receiver here at Memphis, opted out after starting the first couple of games for the Tigers. This year, Calvin Austin III is going to be the receiver you want to watch. He's a Memphis kid, played locally here at Harding Academy, put up 1,000 yards last year in 11 games. He'll be a primary target for Gunnell or whoever is throwing the ball downfield for Memphis. Sean Dykes is another guy to watch. He's a preseason all-conference tight end. He set some tight end receiving records here. So they'll be the primary targets, I think, for the Memphis quarterback. And I think who is behind that quarterback will be the larger question right now. Drake Clark is a guy who has some experience. Keelan Watkins is another young man who's been able to get into the backfield a few times. As he cuts his teeth at the Division I level. Kenny Gainwell, there's not a Kenny Gainwell on this roster, so I think if there's a variable to watch for the Memphis offense, it might be the running game.
Well, turning to the defensive side of the ball, it was a defense that probably got roasted a little bit more than they wanted to be last year, but they did get a lot of takeaways, and they were pretty good against the running game. What is the impact of the defense going to be this season?
Yeah, you want to make up for those losses at Cincinnati and Tulane last year that were really ugly, Jeff. Anyone who follows Tiger football, not used to seeing this team lose by 39 points as they did at Cincinnati, and they got whipped almost as badly down in New Orleans. It's a team that there's one star. Let me start off with Quindell Johnson. He's a defensive back, a safety, who is on the Thorpe watch list, the Bednarik watch list. If you pay attention to those kinds of things, he's a defensive star. Led the AAC in solo tackles last year. He's the kind of guy that he's a playmaker on defense. 3 interceptions. He caused a couple of fumbles, had a fumble recovery. Quindell Johnson's a star, and up front the Tigers have a young man named Morris Joseph, who's also gotten some all-conference recognition in the preseason. Last year was, comparing it with the year before, which, preceded Mike McIntyre's arrival as defensive coordinator, pretty much treading water. They allowed 26 points a game in 2019, 27 in 2020, and that's good for the, first half among, the 128, 130 programs in Division I college football. But, Memphis needs to get better there. There was a time that, defense was the calling card here. I have not done the scouting I'm going to need to do, once camp gets underway, to tell you who the difference makers might be this year. That'll come obviously on September 4th, and the big date is 2 weeks later when Mississippi State comes to town, September 18th. But Quindell Johnson is a star, and he's a guy that your listeners are going to be charting AAC players who might be playing on Sundays in the near future. Quindell's the guy to watch.
Yeah, and so, Memphis has, kind of been of a customary customer, if you will, a participant in the AAC championship game, and last year kind of broke that streak. What will it take for them to get back to that level this season?
Yeah, it's going to, you can't lose 3 games in the league as they did last year, so you're going to have to knock off, the majority of who's on that schedule, and now they get a break, and the Cincinnati is not part of their regular season schedule this year, and the only other team that's looked at as superior to the Tigers on their schedule is UCF, and they come up in October 22nd, and the game's going to be down in Florida. So the Tigers need to beat the Knights, and then they need to hold serve at home against the likes of SMU and Tulane. They finished their regular season against Tulane, a team they're not going to take lightly, I assure you, after what happened last season down in Louisiana. So it's the old saw. It's going to take winning one game at a time, 1 week at a time, and Ryan Silverfield refuses to circle any team on his schedule beyond Nicholls State, but I'd go ahead and circle UCF, SMU, and Tulane as critical to the Tigers getting back to the AAC championship game.
Yeah, and you look again, speaking of, how the AAC continues to get stronger in football, it's not just, the top 2 that make noise now in this conference. You mentioned SMU. Tulane is always a tough encounter. Houston could possibly be back in the mix. Then you got Cincinnati as the defending champion. UCF will certainly be in there. There's a lot of talent in this conference that whoever comes out on top is definitely going to have earned it.
Yeah, Jeff, nobody likes to play Navy. No one wants to play them.
Exactly.
That triple threat offense. And, playing at Temple up in Philadelphia has proven tough, at least for Memphis and other teams. So, the league is underrated. The last 2 years they've sent a team to a New Year's Six bowl game, or maybe the last 3. I may be undercutting them there. But the league is not a Power 5, I suppose, but it's good football every Saturday, often on Thursdays and Fridays, as we know, with the TV schedule. So, it's a championship well earned. I like the way you put it. It's not a trophy to take lightly if you're able to raise it, particularly because you got that championship game. It's got to be earned on the field, and I know that's the goal for a lot of guys in silver and blue come September.
All right, so what do you make of all this movement about to happen in college football with Texas and Oklahoma bound for the SEC? Lots of talk about the American trying to raid the Big 12. Where do you think all this shakes out? You got any early opinions on that?
Man, my head is spinning, Jeff. Yeah, Oklahoma and Texas really shook things up, and it's hard to imagine the SEC getting stronger and further separating itself from the rest of college football. But nabbing the Longhorns and the Sooners, I think, just about pulls it off. As for what happens with the teams in the American, my hope would be that geographically they figure out something with the remaining teams in the Big 12. That makes sense on so many levels. My Twitter feed today popped up something about the Big 12 merging with the Pac-12. How is that? I don't know how that would improve things on the larger landscape that is college football. I think if you found a situation where Oklahoma State and Baylor and the remaining clubs, the remaining programs in the Big 12 are facing off the likes of Memphis and Cincinnati and SMU and Houston, that could be a really exciting league. And we know now with what the SEC is doing that as many as 18 football teams, or I guess 16 football teams, can be in a league. So, Laird Veach, if I'm the athletic director at Memphis, I'd be having those conversations now with the powers that be and try and get an inside track for the Tiger program.
Yeah, and the other big off-season news, of course, is expansion in the college football playoff, looking like it will be expanding to 12 teams down the road. And you have to look back and see what the American has done as far as helping to ring that bell with UCF and Cincinnati and Memphis having made runs to the New Year's Six. and UCF and Cincinnati were right on the periphery of the big rankings. Give me your thoughts on that. The basis would be that the American would actually have a clear path to be in the playoff. But it also opens up more SEC teams being in the playoff too.
Yeah, it's true, Jeff. My first reaction is it's absolutely great for those teams outside the Power Five. There is going to be a path in, whether it's clear or not. A much more likely path to being able to play for the national title if you play in the AAC or one of the other group of 5 leagues. Because there's just no way with a 4-team playoff that the Tigers or the Knights or the Midshipmen or Golden Hurricane are going to crack that top 4. Top 8, top 12. If you can go 12-1, 13-0 with a league championship, you're in there. And once you're in, it's when it's winner, advance, lose or go home. You will see eventually an AAC national champion, I believe, and so I'm excited by that. I think a larger field, as long as we don't get ridiculous with it and end up with college football players expected to play 16 to 18 games, I think that would be absurd. But if you can keep it to a 3-tier playoff championship, I'm all for it, and I think it's great for the sport. Until I'll add the corollary that you did. The SEC is so packed, and if you have a top 25 in which you have as many as 4 or 5 SEC programs in the top 10, then what do you do? I mean, then it just becomes another version of a SEC playoff, and I don't have a quick answer for you there, buddy. It's you're gonna have to beat multiple SEC teams on your way to a national title, I guess.
Yeah, I think that is definitely part of the equation. The name, image, and likeness stuff that's coming up. What impact has that had with the Memphis program, if any?
I can't speak to specifics there. I haven't talked to any of the players that have signed any deals or made arrangements. There is a young Memphis basketball recruit who has had a camp. I believe I read about just this past weekend, and he's going to get some cash out of that. That's a new landscape, obviously, Jeff, for all of us, and I think it's a healthy one. That for so long the sport has made bank on young men that aren't putting away any funds beyond a scholarship, and those scholarships have value. I preach old school with that. If you get your education, for being in part an athlete, you're coming out ahead. But I'm just interested to see what the market does. My father was an economics professor, Jeff, and I think his head would be spinning here because you just got so many college athletes. And as the commercials like to tell us, most NCAA athletes don't go pro. Well, a lot of them are going to be going a version of pro depending on what they can negotiate with sponsors. And I think it's healthy for a capitalist, community, a society in which we live. And we'll just have to see which avenues the athletes take. I just hope it's kept on the surface and up front, and it's if you have value to your name and likeness, put away some money.
Yeah, I also think though there might be the need for some sort of structure to it though at some point, because this is going to be impactful in recruiting. No question. Nick Saban's boosters own a lot of businesses, and so that could have a huge impact. So,
Jeff, yeah. I mean, you're speaking of the elephant in the room, and I'm borrowing Alabama's mascot for you there. Absolutely, it's so easy for boosters to sponsor a camp for 3 times what that young man's camp would be sponsored for by a school with less money in its purse. So yeah, how you regulate it though, it seems like the toothpaste's out of the tube, and now it's not going back in. But how do you distribute that toothpaste to the right brushes? I'm taking a metaphor way too far here. Yeah, you're onto a very good point. It's a more honest system when the athletes can make money that is otherwise going to the institutions for whom they're playing. But if there's not some kind of margin or dare I use the word, salary cap or sponsor cap, it's just going to get out of control, and the rich are going to get richer, and it's going to end up backfiring for the institution of college football as a whole.
Yeah. Well, one thing we know for sure, that college football is probably evolving into pro football light to some degree, if you will. So Frank, if you had to bet your house on what Memphis would do this season, what do you think it would be?
Wow, my house. I've been in this house 15 years, and I've got a daughter in college. I got to be careful. I think that the season might tip, Jeff, when Mississippi State comes to town. The Tigers were there was a time they were regional rivals with the Bulldogs, played here or in Starkville annually. They haven't played in 10 years, not since 2011, and Memphis hasn't won a game against the Bulldogs since 1993. I would like to see the result of that ball game, and you're gonna have a Tiger team that's kind of fallen back a step or two and is no longer able to compete with SEC teams, even second-tier SEC teams, or you're going to have a Tiger team that reestablishes itself as top 25 contenders. And if the Tigers beat Mississippi State, I think you could be looking at a 9-3, maybe 10-2 regular season, and another trip to the AAC championship game. And if you win that, we're talking New Year's Six bowl game possibility. So if I could hedge my bet on that Mississippi State game, they beat the Bulldogs, 9 or 10 wins. They lose to the Bulldogs, you might be looking at more of a 8-4 regular season, 7-5, and some climbing still to do. All right.
Well, Frank, before we let you go, please make shameless plugs for all your endeavors, if you will, please.
Well, I'm still selling my novel, Jeff. If you'll allow me, Trey's Company is a book I wrote 4 years ago. You can find it on Amazon.com. It's a coming-of-age novel about a 13-year-old boy spending a summer away from home and getting into trouble and falling in love and all those things we like to read in good books. So I'd love if your listeners would give that a shot. It's Trey's Company, TREY''S. And other than that, find my work at MemphisFlyer.com, MemphisMagazine.com, and come Tiger football season, I'll be here for you, following best I can and trying to make analysis sound intelligent, which can be a leap for most of us sometimes.
Well, Frank, we look forward to it, and we will definitely be in touch throughout the season. Thanks again for your time this evening.
I appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this week's edition of the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network, as we are back on a weekly basis. As always, please follow me on Twitter at JeffAllen_88, and you can follow the Nightline Sports Network at UCF_Nightline. This has been the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. Thanks for listening.